Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Mel Carmine Show. I'm your co-host here, Elisa V. I'm so happy to have you here with us today. Today, we have a really special guest. We are going to be speaking with Larry Ballard, who is joining us for an unfiltered discussion about Trump's trade agenda. Um, hey, Larry, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Elisa.
Good.
Looking forward to our interview.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. I just want to remind everyone if you want to tune in every week on Mondays at 4 p.m. Eastern time. I was going to say standard, but I think we're in daylight savings time now, so it's 4 p.m. Eastern. We have got a lineup called The Forecast. We go live every Monday. It's Mel. It's Mike Barra, Laura Eisenhower, and yours truly. And we sit and talk about, what's happening out there in the world. It's very raw. We talk about a lot of things and how it's impacting us. And we love to get your feedback. So, be on there so you can interact with us during that. And also a reminder, if you were unable to attend or tune in to the Quantum Summit 2 last month, you can still catch the full event on the replay, which is available at quantumsummit1776.com. And lastly, but certainly not least, check out our sponsors in the description box. Got some wonderful products and services that we believe can really help you. And one of which is, of course, Carmine's Gold. So check that out as well.
But before we get started, folks, make sure you hit the pause button. Okay, go down below. There's a Rumble link. Go over to Rumble and follow us over there. QFS1776.com is without question the holy grail of what's to come. Okay, t-shirts. You got to get yourself decorated. This way, people will ask you, what is XRP? What is the quantum financial system? What is this? What is that? And you send them where? To QFS1776.com, where they need to immerse themselves because we're going to burn down this system down to the ground. And out of the ashes will rise the phoenix. There'll be nothing to go back to. Believe me when I tell you that. Also, our Telegram groups down below. If you want to learn what's coming and you're sort of a little scared, I understand. Believe me, I was there too at one point. And if you need more than $10,000 worth of XRP or $1 million worth of XRP, you come see me. Send me an email at QFS1776@gmail, and we'll get you as much as you want. Gold and silver. Welcome to Carmine'sGold.com. Don't waste not even a second looking. Cheaper prices just don't exist. How important is it for you to own gold and silver right now? What does it mean to me personally? There's an economy that's about to crash beyond what words can explain. In 5 words, I'm going to educate you on gold and silver. Are you ready? You need to own some. Simple.
Hi, Elisa V here. Did you know that medical bills are the leading cause of bankruptcy in the United States, accounting for 66.5% of bankruptcies? In fact, in 2022, 17% of adults with healthcare debt either declared bankruptcy or lost their homes due to it. We can all agree that the healthcare system is broken. Well, there is an alternative that I want to tell you about. It is impact health sharing, which Yahoo News is calling the disruptor in the $4.6 trillion healthcare system. With impact health sharing, you can choose the doctors, clinics, and naturopaths that you want with less restrictive guidelines. Medical bills are reduced to their fair market value, and premiums are 30 to 72% cheaper than competitors. Plus, Impact Health incentivizes healthy habits like supplements, gym visits, and therapy. Call 844-275-1056 and use the code MELCARMINE for a free quote today. Now, without further ado, I would love to give a big warm welcome to Larry. And Larry, I want to just tell everyone a little bit about you, if you don't mind. I just want to give like a little bit of
Sure.
background. So, Larry Ballard his messages are really ordained by God, and he studied history and religion because they are the key to understanding world events. He gained invaluable firsthand experience working in construction, nuclear energy, real estate, bioengineering, and the medical field. And he traveled domestically and internationally, including Mexico, Canada, Europe, and China. These experiences gave him insights into the events of 9/11, our intentional loosening trade policies, our open border policies, the 2008 financial collapse, universal health care, and the hidden agenda behind the climate change narrative. Most importantly, he gained insights into the elite's plan to trigger a financial collapse that would thrust the world into financial chaos. But in Larry's own words, God showed him how America would be used to restore order out of chaos and lead the world into a period of peace, prosperity, and spiritual awakening, unlike anything the world has ever experienced. So, Larry, it's so nice to have you. And
Nice to be here.
yeah, and I want to just like jump right into things if you don't mind. I want to talk about on this show and share your views and wealth of information on this whole Trump trade agenda. And I think,
Mhm.
for anybody who's like not living under a rock at this point, especially for, the average citizen, right? These tariffs have caused all kinds of, great deal of upheaval. People, some people are freaking out, some people are for it and happy. But I think when it comes to those people that really are freaking out and, getting triggered by every time they hear how he's implementing these plans to have tariffs.
Mhm.
I think it's really because they just don't understand Trump's real agenda and what it is. And, I want to just get into that discussion. So let's start with the very basics. What are tariffs and what
Well,
purpose do
tariff.
they serve?
Well, if we listen to Trump's current comments, it's to make America great again. But let's go back to the history where it all started.
Yeah.
Basically, America became great because of tariffs. When we were founded, we didn't have the Internal Revenue Service. We didn't have the Fed. We didn't have the central bank. We had a nation that was funded by tariffs and a simple sales tax. That was it. And then let's fast forward to the period of 34 years following the Civil War. And we had gone bankrupt fighting the Civil War. And now basically we had to rejuvenate America. And we did it. We did it in 34 years. 34 years later, on the centennial anniversary of the United States of America, we hosted 10 million people from around the world and made a startling announcement. America, the youngest nation in the world, thanks to tariffs, is now the wealthiest nation in the world, having succeeded, bring England that had over a 300-year head start on us. So what it means is you're charging other nations a fee for the right to do business in your nation. And so how we orchestrated this great turnaround is we realized that England was doing to us then what China has been doing to us now, and they were having unfair trade agreements, and they were basically causing America to bleed out. And so what happened is the colonists back then decided that they needed to change that, so they put tariffs on England to make their products too expensive to buy. So what happened was we had no choice except this. What do they say? Necessity is the mother of invention.
Yeah.
We had to innovate, and America innovated the Transcontinental Railroad. It innovated the assembly line, the automobile, the telephone, etc., and that's what led us to where we became wealthy. So basically, America turned inward, and when we turned inward, we innovated the Industrial Revolution, and then we shared it with the world, and we got out from under the unfair trading policies that had been inflicted on us by Britain. And now Trump is trying to do the same thing to get us out from under unfair trading policies that we have from China. And where all of that kind of reemerged and started to percolate and get us to where we are today was when the global elite decided to use Jimmy Carter to siphon out money from the United States and to slowly collapse us. When that happened, when he came into office, we were over 100 years old, and we had a $660 billion national debt. That was it, not even $1 trillion. And now it's 36 trillion. And it's attributable to two principal things: the ongoing perpetual wars that they put us into, and the tariff drains that we had. So basically, I hope that answers your question, gives you some footing and some foundation.
Okay, absolutely. Now, I just had a couple of questions that came from your, the way you explained it. So we go back to the colonial days, right? And we're in the 1700s, late 1700s. And it was at that point, you're saying, that the colonists decided to, they realized what was going on. And so is that when the implementation
It was following the Civil War.
Oh, the Civil War.
We started out without tariffs. We started out with simple sales tax. We didn't have the burden placed upon us by the Internal Revenue Service. That didn't happen until 1913.
Yeah.
So there's periods of breaks and changes. So following the Civil War is when we went bankrupt and we were taken over by the corporation in 1771. We had to have some way to get out of that bondage that we put in. And the answer was go to tariffs and change the economic structure, which is exactly what Trump is doing now.
Okay. And that was under whose administration at the time, historically, in the
Well, it would have been under a couple of administrations, but the one that you mentioned, so it basically started under Lincoln, but the one that you mentioned in our pre-talk was McKinley. So let's talk about him for a second.
Yes.
So McKinley was for two things that you're not supposed to be for if you want to live a long life. He was for gold and he was for tariffs. So he was one of the principles that basically, so Lincoln started it and he finished it. They killed him, they assassinated him, and he was for a third thing. You cannot be the leader of the world under any consideration unless you can do these following four things. You have to be able to control natural resources. That's why we developed the Transcontinental Railroad, to get access to our resources. You have to be able to manufacture goods and not be overly dependent on other nations. And we're not in that position right now. We've given up that security. You have to be able to control trade. So to control trade, looking at what's happening today, Britain became the nation the sun never set on because they had choke points all over the world. They owned every major seaport in the world. So they basically had the natural resources that they had pillaged from their colonies. They manufactured their products cheaper than anybody else because they did it in sweatshops, and they also just stole those raw materials, and then they had control of all the seaports. So that's what made them great. So we had to follow that same profile and take those things back for ourselves if we were going to leapfrog them and become the most successful nation in the world. That's what Trump's trying to do. He's trying to give us back control of our natural resources, bring America straight manufacturing back, and put Buy America policies in place, and go out and get desperately needed seaports so that we can't have our trade cut off in the future. Now, what happens when all that happens? Money starts coming in, and basically you're able to do whatever you want to do, build infrastructure. The ceiling's the limit once you've got an unlimited amount of money coming in, because you're controlling trade, and trade is the most lucrative way to make money in the whole world. I hope that answers your question. So, by the way, they killed McKinley, and to add insult to injury, it wasn't only gold, it wasn't only tariffs, but he was working. They killed him at a Panama conference attended by 50,000 South Americans, and basically he was advocating for a railroad from America down through Latin America into South America, and they didn't want that because England wanted to retain control of trade by the sea, which is where we are still today.
Mm-hmm.
So
Wow.
take me wherever else you want to go.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's very interesting. So, all right, why are people freaking out? I mean, I just scroll. I don't really spend a lot of time, but I'll scroll through social media, especially like on LinkedIn, where you have more business people as opposed to, people talking about their personal lives. And, it seems like everybody is in this freak out about the tariffs and how negative it's going to be impacting everything. Could you speak to that? I mean, what are they really afraid of, or what are they experiencing that they are afraid of these tariffs and feel that this is a bad move for America? which certainly it's not, especially in light of your past explanation.
Dare I say it? There's something that Trump called the swamp, something that he called the lying media, something that I call propaganda, and I call it censorship. Well, there's a whole lot of people who tune into CNN and other sources, and they're being lied to. They're being told that this is going to be catastrophic to the United States, and basically the cost of everything is going to go up. And then the lying media tweaks this. Trump made the mistake of saying we're going to have some bumps, but then the stock market's going to go down and come right back, and everything's going to be fixed in no time. Well, hold on. It took centuries to basically, well, let's say centuries, at least 100 years, to navigate us into the position where we've got a $36 trillion national debt and are literally tipping on the brink of collapse. So you think with the opposition from the global financial elite, from the media, et cetera, from our bought and paid for politicians, that this is going to be painful, that it's going to happen in a week or a month? No, this is going to cause some pain, but this is very different than 1929 and 08. So let's talk about those, and I'll come back and more directly answer your question in a second. So they have the ability, since we have a central banking system, to control our economy anytime they want. They can cause a financial collapse any day of the week, cause the stock market to collapse. So in terms of driving that message home that you're talking about, fearing the people being in fear,
yeah,
the global financial elite are triggering this collapse. They have the ability. So let's go back and get some evidence from history. 1929, what did they do? It's something way bigger than people understand. So in 1929, it was following the end of World War I. And you need to know that to know how heinous what they did to us was. So going into the Roaring '20s, they printed money, and they allowed you to borrow money at very low rates, and they allowed you to do something you'd never done before. You could buy stock at 10% down, 90% leverage. So all the global elite had to do was wait until that bubble in the stock market got big enough and the elite were full enough that they were ready. And on one day, they collapsed it. Now, very few people were in the stock market at that time. That shouldn't have been a worldwide event that lasted for a dozen years. But there's more to the story. These people are heinous, and they make plans that last for decades. We were coming out of World War I. During World War I, we had loaned money to the Allies, which now had an obligation to pay us back after the war. Okay. And now Germany had lost the war, and they had an obligation to pay retributions to the Allies. So what they always do, there's a formula. They print the money, they create an opportunity, people come in and invest at lower interest rates, then they pop the bubble, then the very next thing they do is freeze the credit. So now what should have been a short-lived, mild recession in America became a worldwide global event because they froze the credit, and the money no longer went from the US to Germany to pay the retributions. So it no longer came from France and Germany and the Allies to us, and the entire global financial system was impacted. And then comes Roosevelt with his socialist communist agenda, and basically that lasted for decades, or well, for a decade. Then let's go to 08. What did they do in 08? And they're dropping up something similar to that right now today, just so you know, and it's not done by Trump. Here's what they did in 08. Yeah, I was in real estate for 12 years. Mm-hmm. I was a broker. I eventually ended up owning my own firm. So you'll kind of get an idea that I know a little bit about it. Plus I worked in construction. So in 08, they said, we are going to do something for the people. We're going to allow people to buy a house with no money down and at very low interest rates. So they did. And that was the subprime mortgage scandal. Right. And what happened is when you come in and buy a normal house on a normal conventional loan, you get 20% down and you get a 30-year mortgage if that's what you want. When you buy it with no money down and no income verification, by the way, so people were buying houses that had no way to pay for it, then you know automatically you're going to raise the interest rates, so you know they're going to default. And you give them an arm. You don't give them a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. So 3 years out, when those loans mature, the rates go up, and they go up markedly. So everything crashed. It was all done on cue. We walked into the trap. They triggered the trap, and that was it. So now I'm going to jump forward. It's not quite related to the tariffs, but I want you to understand they have booby traps set for us. Yeah. So let's go to where we are today. Then we'll come back to tariffs. So what are they doing to us today that goes beyond the last few days where they've triggered that? That was just done by fear. They've triggered the market with fear. So now what time bomb have they put out there for us, or landmine? Here's what they've done. Now you can go out and you can get an FHA loan for 3% down. And with a credit score, catch this, in the 500s, which basically means you're not a qualified buyer, right? And you get one of those nice little arms again, okay? And so here's what's happened. Many of those, then the Fed steps in and go back a year or so, and what the interest rates start to go up, right?
Yeah.
Well, many of those loans have already defaulted and come to maturity where they're not just delinquent, but they should have been taken into foreclosure. They were not. What happened is the Biden administration, wanting to hang this on Trump and exacerbate what we're seeing today, laid a landmine. They paid for 1.4 million mortgages every month to keep the market from collapsing. So the bubble would keep getting bigger. We wouldn't know what was going on. And they could say, oh, just like in 08, we were asleep, we got caught. And so you think what they're doing to us now? Just think about what they're about to do with real estate. And then there's another aspect to the real estate market. And real estate is not the entirety of what controls our economy, but it's a big part. So we had COVID. And so everybody can go work at home, right? So now people didn't come back. So Trump's forcing the people to come back within the government sector,
Right.
but there's still people in the private sector that aren't coming back. And so what did that do? You got the real estate market that's divided into two segments. You've got the residential and the commercial. So the other sleeping gun out there is that there are billions of dollars of real estate in the corporate sector that aren't being used. And they're defaulting on those loans, on those leases. They're walking away. And so both segments of the real estate market are intentionally designed to collapse. So that goes back to the question about what's happening with tariffs. They want to lay this on Trump because they want the American people to become fearful. And if we don't stand up and back him up, we will have lost the opportunity of a lifetime. Right now, the global financial elite have embarked upon a plan to create a new reset. So basically their fiat currency scheme, currencies backed by nothing, right? Eventually takes you up to where the debt gets so great that they have to collapse and they have to start all over again. And they make us promises, we'll have a gold-backed system this time. So they've set this up because they want to have this great reset because they think they're going to win and they're going to take us into slavery. Well, so what's going on with that? The UK is bankrupt. Japan is in dire trouble. Russia, now exacerbated by the war and the sanctions, is in very severe trouble. China is losing everything that controlled it. So let's talk about China for a moment. China has more assets in real estate than any other nation in the world. They built all of those cities that were ghost cities, and now they're blowing them up. So the real estate, depending on what city you lived in, has already collapsed to 70 to 90% of its value. And the Chinese people don't have the options to put their money all the places we do. So they've basically lost their life's savings in the real estate collapse. Then you've got the one-child policy. And what did the one-child policy do? It now has affected them to where they don't have enough workforce to man their factories. And then they've got 40% unemployment, particularly with the youth. So basically, the people in China have lost their life savings. They've lost their jobs. They've got unemployment. They have no hope. And China is a tinderbox waiting for an internal revolution. China is less afraid of any other nation in the world. They're primarily afraid of their own people revolting. So China is teetering on the brink. So the last piece, their economy basically stands on two pillars, real estate and manufacturing. And what happened is basically the global financial elite under the Carter administration funneled money, massive amounts, trillions of dollars to China, and it all bled out of us with intentionally losing trade policies. Particularly the policy was called NAFTA. And we had a $660 billion national debt the day that that was signed. And then every administration thereafter, the debt doubled or tripled because we were losing money on all these deals. That's what Trump is doing. So he has 3 or 4 different things he's trying to accomplish with his tariff policies. So one is to get back on a trade policy that doesn't cost us to lose money and drive that national debt up. But the other is that we have a national emergency from our borders. And he wants to get, this is what he's done with Mexico. He wants to get the fentanyl stopped, the human trafficking stopped, the border crossings stopped, and basically get national security. And then if you look at what's he doing with Greenland and with the Panama Canal, that's national security.
Yeah.
So the picture is huge. We can't cover it in one conversation here, but what Trump is trying to get back are the essential building blocks that give a nation security. He must control trade. Let's start with manufacturing. So what's happening? Foxconn, the largest manufacturing facility in the world, 100,000 employees in a single location, is bringing its manufacturing to 5 different cities, 5 different countries. Manufacturing is leaving, and China is becoming the next Detroit. So if they've lost their manufacturing and lost their real estate, they've lost the basis of their economy.
Yeah.
And so they're in absolute turmoil. So China is going to fight us tooth and nail. Plus, they're proud. They're going to be the last ones to come to the table and say, we'll negotiate. Mm-hmm. But there's a geopolitical shift happening. And before we finish, we should come back and understand how that's affecting. So Trump has multiple reasons. He wants to stop the bleeding in trade. He wants to basically be able to get control of the natural resources that we have to have in order to do the trade and do the manufacturing. And at the same time, he wants to secure our borders and secure U.S. national interests around the world. So with that, let me stop and let you take me wherever you want to go.
No, that was amazing. The only thing I will interject, going back a little bit when you were talking about how they just print money out of nothing, I think we know that they're not really printing it out of nothing. It's based on us as collateral and our birth certificates and what they're doing in terms of trading on us. So most people aren't aware of that. They think the birth certificate was like, a little, now I have the footprints and so nice. And it's just this little piece of right? I mean, what did most people know, right? It's a documentation of the birth of your child, etc. Not knowing when you sign it, you're signing this little human away, as a legal fiction. And now they're going to, be able to trade this person. So for people who don't quite understand, and we're not going to really go down that rabbit hole, they don't just print out of nothing. We're all worth, millions, maybe billions of dollars. And, the lie that they've told us is that when we want to buy a house or a car and we go for financing, right, they're taking it from where that fund is our money. And then that's where it's coming from. And then they're charging us interest, right? So, some of these facts we need to, like with the censorship, people need to become more educated, like with what you're talking about, because they are not going to be told this. And they're sort of like, people are in this Stockholm syndrome, when you say to people, even like the IRS is going to go away, and oh no, they get like defensive, like it's good. Like, 2 days before they were complaining they got to pay taxes, but then if you tell them it's going away, they start getting defensive. So I think, as you've said, the idea of tariffs is tied in it just ripples into everything and from everything in terms of understanding our monetary system and how the country is in debt and why, and these games and these tactics that are used to constantly keep us from becoming prosperous and building back our country. So let me ask you, when it comes to kind of
before you do that, let me add to what you just said. What you said is correct, but I need to punctuate what I was saying because they layer together. So basically what happens, Joseph Stamp, who was the head of the Bank of England in the 1920s, said that basically the banking system is the most evil entity in the world. And if you want to remain slaves, stay within their central banking system and it will be assured. So here's what I meant when I said it's printed out of nothing. So they don't have any collateral backing the dollar that they print. It's just a computer entry that says print $1 billion. And what happens is that $1 billion is printed and it turns into a bond, a treasury note. That treasury note has an interest obligation that's on it. So our system was founded on interest. The very first dollar ever printed was a debt obligation, as was the second, as was the 36 trillion. So it's a Ponzi scheme so that every dollar that is ever printed systematically increases our national debt until the point of implosion, and then they start over again. So that's the cycle that we're in now. It originates where you said, but now we're looking at the full life cycle of that, and now we're ready to collapse again because we've reached the point that resistance is too great. People don't know whether they can pay their mortgages. They don't know if they can buy food or the medicine, and so it's designed to collapse. That's the reset that they're trying to accomplish. Trump is trying to create a different reset, a reset where we go back to what made us great in the first place, and we will eventually get rid of, what did he say, 88,000 IRS agents are going to go away. We're going to go away from the central banking system. We're going to go to decentralized. Everything is going to decentralize. We're going to go from globalization to deglobalization, from a global monetary system to a decentralized monetary system, from fiat currency backed by nothing to a system backed by crypto, stable coins, and gold. And that's the reset that we want. And that's what's essentially behind what Trump is doing. Now I'll reverse to you and ask the question. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to add to what you said.
Thank you. So let's just kind of take a little turn here, because I wasn't planning to kind of go this route, but you mentioned how we're trying, the goal of the globalists and the elite and the banksters is to take us into, keep us, I should say, in this centralized system of banking, right? Which is a debt system, right? Anyway, and a Ponzi scheme. Now, Trump's agenda, which I don't think most people understand, is to move us into this decentralized system. I'd love for you to talk about that a little bit, because I think a lot of people, maybe not Mel's audience, but we're expanding and more people are watching us. And some of the people that are, coming aboard now, I think this whole idea of crypto, and you have things like XRP, you have stable coins, you have utility tokens, all this kind of stuff. People don't really understand it. So is there a way you can explain why and in what way the decentralized system works and why that becomes beneficial to us as a people?
Do you have a week?
Well, maybe we can try to just,
No,
I know.
I'm just kidding.
I'm
just kidding. I'm just kidding. I can give you a thumbnail. All right, so let's start with an old tried and true saying: power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So basically, when you control, it's a cascade. You control natural resources, manufacturing, and trade. That's the wealth of the world. That then converts into money. And what do? They buy power and influence. So in the instance of the United States, not only have they taken those controls away from us, but then they've used the money to do what? To control the spheres of influence: the family, religion, education, the media, entertainment, politics. They buy our politicians, the economy, and military-industrial complex. That's what's going on. So now let's dissect what you said with that in context. All right, so here's what they do. I'm going to blank in what I want to say here. Restate this, the last part of your question. Oh, a central banking system. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay. So I'm back on track. So basically, here's what happened. They went to globalism because that gives them that power. Power corrupts, and absolutely power corrupts absolutely, because they were in control of the money system. So let's just take a couple of simple examples for your audience. What happens every time there's something that the global financial elite wants or the political sector wants? We have an increase in oil prices. We have inflation. We have manipulations that put us in financial distress. And what does that do? That allows them to control the necessities of life because we have less money. So we're controlled. And one of the principal things we're controlled by, which is a topic that I've covered in several shows, is energy. Unbeknownst to most people, is the central cost, the most important component of every item you will ever buy in your entire life. So that's why it was said in the Bible and exists today that all of the angst existing in the world revolves around energy, around oil, and whether we're going to get new technological energy solutions or not. But basically, to go back and try to look at it from a different perspective, if they control global finance, so they basically shifted the majority of manufacturing to China, right? Which means we're now dependent on China. China has gone out and gone to other nations and got control of most of the natural resources in the world. At this point, Trump is going against that, and they've now enjoy most of the manufacturing. So if they control the natural resources and the manufacturing, and they got 92 seaports around the world, isn't that the formula that we started with? That is what made England able to be the nation the sun never set on. That's exactly what's happened. So centralization, add in socialized medicine, and now they're controlling our health, our food, our living. They're basically able to create wage suppression. So they're basically able, under globalization,
throw in big pharma because that, of course, keeps us. That's a cycle with bad food, and bad drugs, and now we're just being killed.
So effectively, they're able to control all the necessities of life with globalization. When you deglobalize, the whole world's going to have to change. We're going to have natural resources deposited in inventory in every continent in the world. We're going to have to pop their bubble on the new Green Deal and expose it dramatically. And when that happens, things are going to change in a very, very big way, because we're going to systematically take away their control mechanisms. We're going to have the natural resources all over the world. So all of a sudden, they can't pull a trigger and we can't get semiconductors, and we're waiting a year and we can't manufacture anything. So we're going to have manufacturing spread out all over the world, so no one spot can be tapped in order to bring the economy down. So decentralization spreads everything out so that there's no one place where they can create a choke point, and that frees up the entire commerce of the world. So that's what's happening with deglobalization. Now there's decentralization. So here's what the world is now coming to. People may not realize this, but people do not want to live under communism. They particularly do not want to live under China with their social credit score and with their camera surveillances and with what they've done with suppression of religion and on I could go. So basically, no matter what they tell you, we are the lesser of two evils. They want to be under America as a nation where they think they're going to get some freedom. And if they know history, they know when we developed that Industrial Revolution, we shared that technology. We shared that railroad technology. We shared everything we did. And the whole world was being equalized and elevated and had a better standard of living until they inflicted us with World War II. So now let's go to the two things to answer it succinctly. If they can take us from globalization to deglobalization and decentralization, now they no longer have those checkpoints. And then the second thing, so basically the world wants to move away from China's control of trade, but they also want to move away from the US's control of the money. Because if the two things happen in parallel, now there's national sovereignty for all the nations of the world. Right now, there's only one nation in the world that I would say has sovereignty, and that's Russia. Because Russia is the only nation, to my knowledge, only major nation that is not part of the central banking system, which means that Russia alone has sovereign currency. So what we see happening is we see the world moving away from globalization to deglobalization, getting freedom and moving away from control from the dollar to basically a system that's better. I think there's a slide here that I would go through with you that'll explain the genius of what Trump is doing. Give me just a second.
Yeah. And, just I'm going to make a few comments here while you're looking through there.
Okay, I got it. Whenever you're ready, go ahead.
It's what people, I think, don't also realize is that, part of the globalization that exists includes our media, right? You've said that. You've mentioned that.
Mm-hmm.
So they wield a lot of power in
You
brain.
mean our propaganda centers?
Our propaganda centers. And so when we think about Russia, right, or we think about any of these nations that people, the average person doesn't know was holding out against the centralized banking system, right? We weren't told that. We were just told the lie that these leaders are awful and terrible and, they're evil, and none of us are there watching, right? So, you take a guy like Gaddafi, who did many wonderful things for his people, right? And he's being built up as this awful person because he does not want to have his country be under the centralized banking system. And the same, just to draw that analogy with Russia, I've been in conversations with people where I talk positively about Russia. Most people don't know the Russians helped us during the Revolutionary War and other times in history, and they're like, they just have this view that because they don't know, they're just hearing it on the news, or they're learning it in the propaganda centers we call schools. So it's very interesting that, we need this type of dialogue to happen more and more uncensored so that people can see what else is going on. I also wanted to make a comment and ask you, when we say China and we say the United States, I think what we have to always remember is we're talking about the deep state and the globalists. Like, we're not talking about the people. We're not talking about even some of the, like the average entrepreneurial business person. They're not in that level of nefarious behavior and control. They're just trying to build something and be creative and, do well for themselves. So we got to always like to make that distinction, because we also don't want to fall into the trap that they love us to fall into, which is to hate and to separate ourselves from other humans, right? And that separation keeps us fighting and distracted from what they're doing. So I just wanted to make that point, but go ahead. You had a slide?
Well, I'll wait on that. I'll layer on to what you just said. So basically, yes, Russia, let's caveat with this. Nations do not have allies. They have agendas. If you know their agenda, you can understand. And the second thing that I point out in lots of my presentations is that if you want to understand geopolitics, which I understand very well, you cannot do it from the lens of looking at your nation or any other nation. You have to look at it from the things that are being done are always being orchestrated with the best interests of the global financial elite, not the individual nation. We are just puppets. Yeah. So if you can look at that, you can begin to understand what's going on. And the second piece of your comment about Russia is there were 3 attempts made to get the UN, and Russia blocked the first one. And basically that's why the global elite came against Russia, and that's why the entire Romanov family was executed, because it was a vendetta because of what they've done. And so Russia has always been against globalism. What is Trump against? Globalism.
Yeah. And you go even further, Larry. Agenda? The Russians were the ones who were against the Khazars, which goes even further back, yes. And which we could probably argue is, the vendetta and the hatred that
that's a significant part of it. And it goes even beyond that into the Napoleonic Wars, because now here we get into my Bible stuff. Multiple nations kicked the Khazarians out, but the first country to do it was Russia. So when we get into the Napoleonic War, if you know history, I don't think it was a coincidence that all of the nations that at one point or another had kicked Russia out were the ones that were crushed in the Napoleonic War. So there you go. So let's go back and let's go to this, and we'll look at the genius of the chess player that we called Trump.
Do you want me to share my screen with you? You want me to give you, do you want to share the screen to bring the slide up? Would that be helpful?
I don't know if I know how to do that.
So if you go to the bottom of your Zoom page, you'll see a bunch of icons pop up, like audio, video, participants. And then there's a little button kind of in the middle with an arrow that says share.
I see an arrow. It's not saying anything.
Okay,
I'll try to click on it and see what happens. I did.
Okay, now do you see like a screen that shows little screens, and it asks you to share at the bottom? There's a little prompt.
No, it just kind of muted my screen. Let's just go off of here, and if you want to add it in, I'll
add it in. Yeah, we'll make sure when everybody's watching this, we'll add it in.
So here's the genius of Trump. Trump is allowing the economy to go down because we have to get rid of the global financial elite's control of the monetary system. So listen to what he's doing. I'm actually gonna read this, I think. So navigating the Great Reset, the global financial system must collapse. Trump's ingenious plan to save the U.S. Here we go. Establish U.S. as a global leader in crypto. Then, and so what's he done there? He said, if you buy American-based crypto, he's working to get it so that if you make a fortune, you're not going to pay capital gains. And he said, we're going to be the leader of the world in crypto. So it goes on, devalue the dollar to make U.S. goods more price competitive. That's scaring people. They don't realize that China does that to us all the time, and so do multiple other nations, because if they hold the currency down, what happens is their products are more competitive in the global marketplace. So he's just parroting what they've done back at them. It's not retribution, it's just equalizing the playing field. And then establish a Bitcoin strategic reserve. And I want to comment, this is the genius, and we have more money and more gold than you think. That strategic reserve is not based on the purchase of one single Bitcoin. Did you know that? It's all money that was confiscated by cartel, from the cartel. So he's backing us with their assets, okay? And then it goes on. So I'll read this. Establish a Bitcoin strategic reserve and stable coin and back the US dollar, backed by the strategic Bitcoin reserve, backed by a stable coin, backed by gold, taking us back to the foundation, back to God's economic system, to a system that cannot be controlled. So we're going to have a collapse. But here's what he's done. He's smart enough that he created a parachute and a soft pillow for us to land on. So here's what's happening. This is what the people need to understand, to not be in fear. So it goes on, transition from the fiat dollar to a commodity-backed economy backed by gold. And that's where we land. And then what does he say? Doing that, instead of the global financial elite winning, let's go on. I want to read you one other slide. I don't want to be too dependent on slides. Here's what he's done in response to doing that says it all. So let me pull this next one up, and then we can go back to just our conversation. So as soon as he made the announcements about going to crypto to back our economy and going to gold, he had Scott Bassett, the Treasury Secretary, make an announcement. And here's two quotes from him. He said, we are going to keep the U.S. not as the sole reserve currency. That's what we have been since World War II, right? Since we negotiated the deal. Now, so I'm going to read it from the beginning. We are going to keep the U.S. as the dominant reserve currency in the world, and we will use stable coins to do that. The key word is dominant. And he goes on, Treasury will rescind and amend all previous guidance that hurt digital assets markets. The stablecoin framework will ensure financial institutions, you ready for it, can offer dollar-backed digital assets in a regulated, secure fashion. So what happened? Bam, the XRP cases dropped. It's just a technicality of going before the court and saying we've paid our fines and it's dropped. So he's setting us up to go from a fiat system where every dollar printed is a debt obligation to a system that is backed by stable coins, by gold, by XRP, by Bitcoin, and bolstered up by a transfer of the wealth mechanism of the world, where we get control of the natural resources, we get control of the manufacturing, we get control of the trade, we get the money flowing in, and it's all coming from the change that's happened in the power structure with tariffs. So we renegotiate trade deals at the same time that we balance the tariffs. Here, let me give you, actually, I think it's a good time to go into a couple of slides with statistics, with real facts, so we can nail this down. So Trump has gotten about $5 trillion in pledges to come to the United States. All we need to make that number just blow up is we need for Trump to come in and say the tax cuts that are up for reconsideration will be made permanent. So here's a list. Japan has committed $1 trillion. The UAE, 1.4 trillion. This is not a comprehensive list. Saudi Arabia, 600 billion, Hyundai, 21 billion, Apple, 50 billion, NVIDIA, let's go across 100 plus billion, SoftBank 100 billion, Johnson & Johnson 55 million, Eli Lilly 27 billion, Merck 1 billion, GE Aerospace a billion, and there's more coming.
Wow.
And they'll come when they see that we're going to stick the course to tariffs, and we're going to keep the pledge to keep the taxes down so that the manufacturers out of the country can afford to bring their money in without being overtaxed. And here's a couple of other things. You want to understand the tariff issue in terms of dollars and cents? Here it is. He's not trying to do retribution. He's trying to create a fair trading bloc so that we no longer bleed out. At some point, you bleed out and you die. So here's just a partial list of what we see. These are the tariffs that are on the table before Trump has made his announcement, okay? Mm-hmm. China, these are the trade deficits. China charges us 67%. We charge 34. Taiwan, 64, us 32. Malaysia, 47, us 24. India, 52, us 26. Israel, 33, us 17. Switzerland, 61, us 31. The Philippines, 34, us 17. European Union, 39, us 20. Vietnam, 90, us 46. And the list goes on and on and on and on and on. That's what he's trying to fix. He's trying to bring it to where we are at some reasonable parity. And I think I'm going to go through one more slide, and then let's go back to whatever conversation you want. People don't understand what a tariff really is and what trade really is. Right. It's more than just the tariff. There's more to it. So I'm going to read this slide to you as well. Intentionally losing trade is about more than just unfair tariffs. Unfair trade is also about these four things: intentionally losing trade deals, i.e. NAFTA, that bled us out, okay? Suppression of currency value to gain trade advantage. That's where the countries lower the value of their dollar, of their currency. Third, government subsidies allowing the dumping of items in here. So basically, what did China do? At the behest of the global financial elite, they followed the new Green Deal, and they gave massive subsidies to EVs, massive subsidies to steel, massive subsidies to wind, massive subsidies to solars. And what did they do? Because they were so underwritten by their governments, they were able to dump those products into the market at a cost that we couldn't compete in. So now we're not just talking about a tariff, we're talking about government subsidies. Trump's trying to fix all these things. And one more point, ban on many U.S. products. So there were many products that we weren't allowed to sell into those countries at any cost. So now I think you understand what Trump is fighting for. So now we can go back to our general conversation.
And let's just remember, when NAFTA was enacted, remember we had such a I'm going to speak one particular industry. Look at New York's Garment Center, right? It was robust. It was the center of fashion. It had, American-made clothing, and within, like, my aunt was a designer down in the Garment Center for a couple of decades. One fell swoop, she lost her job. The whole industry imploded. And so people have to understand that they are being fed, they're being fed a line about what these things are, and they have to look at what the reality is and how that, affected our country. So, when all Trump is doing now is trying to get it back to where it should be so that it does become. Now, as a person who was very young, I was in my early 20s, and I worked in the toy business. And so at that time, we were manufacturing our goods in Taiwan, we were manufacturing in the Philippines, we were manufacturing in China, we were just starting in China in the late 80s, early 90s. And, the argument was always, well, are you going to want to pay, $70 for a stuffed toy? Because if it's made here, that's what you're going to pay. And that was sort of my first foray, if you will, into why it was so important to, take this business overseas, because I didn't understand, so I just kind of accepted, like, well, that's what you do. That's what you need to do. And, but I think the reason I'm saying that is because I think other people have that view. You know, it's been an indoctrinated idea that you can't possibly make goods here in the States and be able to sell them at a reasonable price, you know, and that's why I think people have not had negative reactions to us going offshore with, you know, with all the
Yeah.
manufacturing that's done. Do you think that's true? You think most people
Yeah.
just
And I think that's absolutely true because people are short-sighted. But you know, something else is happening in the background that people don't even connect to this. And I'm glad you brought up what you brought up because it's important. So going back on subsidies before we get into this next point,
Yeah.
you and I talked last night, and I went to China just before Tiananmen Square. While I was there, I have 2 patents. I was there to get some tool and die making, or at least to get quotes. Well, with what happened in Tiananmen Square, I left China pretty suspicious. And I decided to pay almost 3 times more to get my tool and die making done here. So God always puts me at the right place at the right time to see the big picture. So my stuff was done here, even though I paid more. Okay. Now let's fast forward and look at what is happening. China, let's go back even further. Japan had, since the 1990s, the economy has just been flattened. Why? Because they had the oldest citizenry in the world, and that made them really have a hard time financially. They were forced to take much of the manufacturing offshore and take it to other nations because they didn't have the manpower to produce it in their own country. Well, that's part of what's happening with China right now. With their one-child policy, they basically have, and their economy is posed by 2050 to go from 1.4 billion to approximately 600 to 700 million. Okay, and huge because they basically they had all those kids that weren't born, and now they said the one-child policy is go off. You can have 2 children, and nobody had 2 children. They said you can have 3 children. They said we'll give you financial incentives to have children, and the people are saying, no, we don't want that because we don't want to live under communism, and we can't afford to have 3 children because you've got us in economic suppression. So we're about to have a major shift that people don't see in this dynamic. It's called manpower. It's called things are no longer being made using low-tech hands. We're going to go to robotics. We're going to go to AI. We're going to go to supercomputers. And here's where the real war is going to be. When we're going to win this trade war, period. America is going to become the most financially strong nation in the world. God's going to get his harvest of souls. But then we're going to roll down the road into the book of Revelation, and it's going to be trade that regens itself in a new way based on technology. But for right now, even right now, we see amazing technology inventions coming out of China. However, we have an Elon Musk. And something that people don't realize is Toyota, for example, just announced a revolutionary new car. It runs on hydrogen. And it's going to put the kiboshes to wind and solar and to the EV in particular, right? So Elon Musk is diversified enough and creative enough that he'll weather that. But here's what he's done that Toyota can't do. Because of his AI, he can produce his cars vastly more efficiently than Toyota can or any other manufacturer in the world. So America, thanks to Donald Trump and thanks to Elon, is going to turn everything around. And what Elon is going to be able to do is using his AI technology, he's still ahead of them. We're going to be able to not depend on blue-collar, low-priced labor. We're going to be given all of the patents that have been suppressed. We had the Chevron deal that came out, and there's some 6,000 U.S., very important, U.S. patents that we innovated during the Industrial Revolution or shortly after that were suppressed. The Chevron Supreme Court decision turned that around and said, you can't hold those.
That was July, right? That was in July?
I don't pay attention to the dates. It was recently.
Yeah, it was
so basically what happened is they said, these have been suppressed because the corporations claimed that was a national security issue.
National security.
The real issue was you're going to get on our pocketbooks of our $7 trillion fossil fuel industry. So basically, Trump has queued us up so that we're going to get access. And those were US patents. So we'll have the first access. And then let me give you an example of how the world's going to change like you can't believe. Recently, I came across a a rocket engine that was engineered by AI. And normally it would take a whole team of people a year or more. With AI, they designed it, 3D printed it, tested it, and it worked in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Well, let's not forget, and we won't go down that rabbit hole, but we've got Nasara and Jasara, which does, most people haven't a clue about that, and that's why we cover that a lot, on Mel's show and on our forecast. But you've got the release as part of that of the 6,000 or so patents that are going to drastically change our life. So whether it's avoiding people having to stand in a field all day picking, vegetables and potatoes, where now robotics can do it and people can be doing other things. Or, like you said, are we really supposed to be driving these cars? Should we be driving other types of gravitic vehicles that get us to places faster? Are our planes, these tin cans basically that we're flying with? Are there other technologies? So you're right, like all this technology is going to be coming out, and the world is going to drastically change. Before we go any further, I understand you have a book. So could you tell us a little bit about it?
Yep. I'll give you a little background. When I died in 68, God gave me my assignment. He says, you're gonna be held to the very last second. You're gonna come out and you're gonna give a message that makes the complex simple. You're gonna open people's eyes, and the truth is gonna set them free. But the time for you to come out, because your message is so deep, won't be till the very end. So I wrote this book, Liberty Crusade, The Fight to Save the Free World. I couldn't get it published. No publisher in the world would touch me. So I get a call from one of the publishers that had just turned me down, Harrison House, and it's one of their editors. And she's a woman, and she gets on the phone and she's laughing. She says, Mr. Ballard, did you ever get that book published? She says, don't answer that. You never did. You never will. She said, but I'm leaving Harrison House. I'm an editor. I know the publishing business. I own a small chain of Christian bookstores. And guess what? I'm going to publish it for you for free.
Wow.
So that's how the book got out. So that's the category that my books are in. They contain so much power that the global elite won't let them out there. So it's only available on Amazon. So if you click on the code, Liberty Crusade, The Fight to Save the Free World. And so if you click on it, here's what you're going to get. God told me I have to make things simple, be quick and easy reads. So I look at history in a way nobody else looks at it. I stop every 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, 100 years, wherever, and describe to you a critical tipping point and move on. So that in one chapter in the book, I give you the entire history of the United States in every single major event that ever happened. So basically, God told me you have to have your story backed by the Bible and backed by history, because it's cast in concrete. It can't be called conspiracy theory, and it is power. So that's what's in this book. So what this book basically does is it tells you what we're talking about, what made America great, how we lost it to the global financial elite, how we are going to get it back thanks to what Trump is doing, and then how we keep it. So it goes into the assault that will be launched against us using technology down the road to turn the tables back around and take control. But in the interim period, we are going to get the position where we become great again, the greatest nation in the world again, and we turn back to God and country, patriotism, one nation under God, indivisible with liberty and justice for all, and God gets his harvest of soul. The only requirement on the American people is they be informed so they can stand up, because here's what this book does. It gives you the information you need to do what India did to get their freedom. India rallied around Gandhi. We've got Trump. And India said at his urging, we are going to no longer participate in the economic system of England. And they broke them. And basically they gave them the freedom. That's what America ultimately has to do to win this war. So Trump's setting it up. He's setting the ball up, queuing it up. But America, by the millions, we have to stand up. And to do that, we have to go back to an understanding of what we were when we were founded. We were not a democracy, not a mobocracy. We were a republic. At that time, it was the first republic in the world. It was a trial. And you had to have the ability to have these things. You had to be educated. with the truth, not the lies. You had to have morality. You had to have patriotism. And you had to be willing at the end of the day, now informed and knowledgeable, to vote your conscience based on what was in the best interest of the nation, not the best interest of other things. So basically, Franklin said that the minute the people understand that they can get money from the treasury, the nation is doomed. And so basically what we need to understand is we have to come back and be that nation that we were, that republic of people who were hardworking and people who had Christian values. And that's what this book teaches you. So we then are empowered and we are able to stand up and do what happened in India under Gandhi's leadership. We can do it. But the American people are going to have to stand up. One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. We will lead America to freedom. And from there, once we're strong again, we'll lead the rest of the world to freedom. That's what's in this book. And we now are at that critical tipping point where we need the people of America to get informed, to buy this book, and then stand up and say no. Say no to the global financial elite. Say no to China, and we take this country back. That's why God gave me that book.
Wow.
So there you go.
We're gonna put a link for purchasing it in the description box. So that'll
Thank
be
you.
below.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. Someone had told me a while ago that until you really understand the banking system, and what money is, you don't understand anything that's going on. So
Right.
for me, the book, The Creature from Jekyll Island was a very pivotal book for me.
Mhm.
I don't know if anybody hasn't read it, you should. I know it's on you could listen to it. I think it's like 20 hours or something like that. But it's a very but hey, these days a lot of us don't have time to you have to work reading in. It's such an important part of us learning and growing. And a lot of us are just, we want things so fast and we don't take the time. But reading is, especially good books like yours and books that educate us about what we're living in and what the reality really is, right? Like the Federal Reserve is neither federal nor does it have reserves. And that statement should make people be curious about learning, just like a lot about what we're talking about today with the tariffs. So we're starting to get towards the end, but I wanted to just have you reiterate for everyone. What is, I know you've mentioned it, but let's just to kind of tie it up in a bow. What is the geopolitical impact of tariffs? What is, because we're thinking of what Trump is doing, it's all about America, and so when we look at it geopolitically, right, in the world,
Mhm.
what is the impact that, and the benefit, I guess, of that, to the tariffs, where the mainstream, and then I think it was Warren Buffett came out the other day and had a couple of negative comments about, tariffs and this and that. So looking
You got to
beyond,
remember, he's a globalist.
of course, but what I'm saying is people, because of the media and because of the propaganda, there have been people that have been put up on pedestals, and whatever they say and whatever comes out of their mouth, and if they give a speech or they give a talk or they're giving a course, I know he sponsors some course on small business, and they just buy it, and we're here to give them the other view into what this is, backed by fact and truth.
Well, what I'm going to say to answer your question is an entire show. So you're going to get the
And we may
thumbnail.
have to have you on
Okay.
again, but if you could just maybe put it, and then that'll be sort of the springboard.
I can encapsulate it for you. So people don't understand there is a total, as a result of what Trump is doing, a total geopolitical alignment. Here's what we had for the last 300 years. We had the Northern Hemisphere versus the Southern Hemisphere. Where was all the money? In the Northern Hemisphere. Where were all the third world countries? In the Southern Hemisphere. Now there's a realignment happening. It's no longer East versus West. It's basically the whole world shifting. And so let's look at what's happening right now. So right now I think the other day there were 50 nations that are willing to come to the table. I think it's now maybe up to 70. So Trump's getting the attention and people are understanding he has the clout, he has the power. But let's break it down into two segments and you'll see the beginning of that geopolitical shift, and then we can go into it in another show in more detail.
Yeah, I'd love
So
to.
our friend Israel has capitulated. The UK, once our greatest enemy, now has left the European Union. They have capitulated. Mexico and Canada have capitulated. So America absolutely must, because of this geopolitical shift, get borders, get Canada to the north, Mexico to the south, Central America and South America within our sphere of influence and control.
Now, when you say capitulated, could you just explain?
I mean, they've agreed to his terms, his trade terms.
Okay.
All right. So now we need to focus on the entire Western Hemisphere, North and South, to create a new geopolitical sphere of influence for the United States, because a realignment is happening in the East as well. Okay. So now let's look at what's happening over there. So basically, Japan, India, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Taiwan have agreed to terms. Now, do you have any idea what that means as far as the implication of the geopolitical shift in the East? If not, I'll just keep talking.
Keep talking.
Okay. All right. So, you know what the string of diamonds and the string of pearls are? Those are naval bases that have been built by China and be built by India to keep trade routes open, because China and India are, you may think they're aligned because they're in BRICS together, they're mortal enemies. They're absolutely mortal enemies. Well, guess what? China has finally revealed who they really are. They're a pariah. And Japan, India, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Taiwan are all aligned with the United States against China. And here's how the geopolitical shift is happening. Because that is the Middle East, and they are basically culturally aligned and language aligned, as trade is coming from China, those are the nations that are benefiting the most. Trade, the largest amount of trade leaving China is going to those nations. They are aligned with the United States. And if you look at it, Japan, that's the third most powerful economic center in the world. Vietnam is bigger than you could even imagine. Yeah. They're huge now. So basically, there's a giant geopolitical bloc that's aligned with the United States. So we could go into Europe. That's another story. We can go into China. That's a whole show. But basically, there's a struggle now for what the geopolitical alignment is going to be. We have to capture the whole North and Southern Hemisphere, North America and South America, in our sphere of influence. We have to maintain control of that sphere of influence that encircles China. And Sun Tzu, my favorite author in the whole world, and Trump's as well, has given us a glimpse into a shifting world. Basically, the global financial elite, in the form of the British, controlled all the seaports. They controlled all the natural resources. They colonized the world and stole resources. Well, what was China trying to do with their Belt and Road Initiative? The same thing. Well, they've all gone bankrupt. All those projects have stopped, partly because China's bankrupt, and partly because they figured out that China was just using the old colonial empire of loaning money to these nations, promising them everything, and then seeing that they defaulted and taking the assets. So they take your gold mine, they take your seaport, they take your railroad. So what's happened is they had probably 90% of all the countries in Africa aligned with the Belt and Road, many in China. I mean, in the Middle East, even a couple in Europe, and many in the Middle East. They're all abandoning the Belt and Road. So what is one of the things Trump needs? Natural resources. That's part of why he's going to China. He's now negotiating a deal with the Democratic Republic of Congo. And if this goes right, I'm going to tell you the Achilles heel that China has walked into. If we can go in there, it's going to be a very delicate negotiation and get it. And then if we can keep our promises, build infrastructure, build a seaport that we will be able to share and give basically to them what we gave to Saudi Arabia, military protection, building infrastructure, building the internals of the nation so it can be prosperous, then the world is looking a little bit to India. But where they will look at seeing the shift in power that America is brokering under Donald Trump, we will be able to go in. If that one deal works, into Africa, and we will be able to negotiate unbelievable amounts of deals for natural resources, securing what we need to drive our position of #1 economic country in the world.
Yeah, well, and that's a whole discussion also is
Yes.
Africa, because we know how it's just been plundered and the way those poor people have just been with all the resources that continent has, and the dire starvation and lack that they've been put in, it's so awful. So it's all coming into the way I see it, just this kind of spiritual evolution and evolving. And, it's all kind of happening at the same time, that all these things are happening and people hopefully are becoming more awakened. And, we're here to be creators and we're here to love one another. And, these initiatives that are being set up, while some people don't get them and get what's really behind it, that's where we're working towards getting to, making the world a better place for all of us to live and thrive and love one another. So this has been so amazing, and there's no doubt we have to have several shows. I would love for the next show for us to talk more about that international picture that you were just talking about. And I tell you, I'd love to get a little bit more into the world of crypto and how that fits into this, because we touched on it a little bit when we got on the subject of the decentralization, but just to explain why and how and what that means and what it looks like and what the role of XRP is. And, so I'd love to do a follow-up show with this, but this has been a joy and I thank you so much.
Let me keep you for one more minute.
Sure.
I want to close on one thing that you were leading us into.
Yeah. And don't forget, I want you to give your information so people can follow you, but we'll get to that.
Okay. All right. So basically, what I want people to understand is that we're going to get access to technology and to energy, right? So here's the shift that's happening on top of all of this, and we need to be the ones driving it. Here's what's happening. We're going to get those technologies. We're going to get that energy that maybe is not totally free, but mostly free and totally clean. So in Africa, did they go to landlines when they went to telephones? They went straight to the phones that we have today, right?
Yeah.
And what's going to happen is this is what's going to happen. America is going to innovate, and the technologies that we bring out are going to be rolled out first to third world countries. They'll be able to have projects that do not depend on a grid, and they will be able to implement them very quickly, bringing their standard of living up, while we are in a position where if we had gotten these technologies when they were first invented, we could have gone from the horse and buggy to the automobile with free energy. There was a 1921 Tesla car that ran on no petrol at all. So for us now, we have a $7 trillion fossil fuel industry. $7 trillion. We will have to bring those technologies in over at least a decade or more. So we're gonna be the innovators. But some of that technology that we innovate will actually go first to third world countries.
Yeah.
So what's that going to do? That's going to equalize and elevate the condition of all mankind, ending the principal cause of war, delivering Trump's end game promise, peace and prosperity for the world. So if you want to buck him, you are bucking the opportunity to have a good standard of living, to have peace and prosperity, to get control of the education system and all the spheres of influence, and to have abundance, the likes of which you can't imagine. So that's the end of it. So you can go to this is terrible. I don't even know my own website address. It's
if you don't have it, we'll put it. Yeah, no, I'll put it in the it'll be it's in the description box.
I'll have to check and get back to you. But I'm on 2 shows every single solitary week. You can catch me there, and I have a feeling you're going to be able to catch me here more frequently. So
yes.
I'm on every single solitary week on Up Front of the Prophetic, and every single solitary week I'm on His Glory, and a whole multitude of others sporadically. But I've enjoyed this interview with you, and you are a good interviewer. You basically brought out the right questions to take us through a cohesive story. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Well, we'll reconnect off camera again and figure out the next one, because I think the value that you bring to people needs to be not just on your platform. You know, you need to be all around to bring this knowledge and information, and that's what we need to do. We need more and more people to understand what's really going on and to understand it, because the brainwashing that's occurred to just vilify this man who has done so much for our country and is doing so much for the world. I'm talking about President Trump. It needs to be known what the truth really is, and not these lying narratives that are out there, you know, that have been put out there by the globalists. So again, thank you.
Thank you, Elisa.
We will be talking soon.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye. Hey, ELISA V here. We all know that legal matters can be costly and stressful. Finding the right representation and dealing with high retainers and hourly bills adds up fast. But what if I told you there's a way to have legal insurance just like your health or car insurance? LegalShield has leveled the playing field. From just $29.95 a month, you get access to lawyers for personal legal matters. From traffic tickets to real estate issues or trust matters, help is just a tap away on your phone. Call or text 516-493-1742 and use code ELISA Legal to start your journey to legal protection today.
Welcome to Carmine'sGold.com. Don't waste not even a second looking. Cheaper prices just don't exist. How important is it for you to own gold and silver right now? What does it mean to me personally? Current times we live in. The price manipulation that has occurred over the last 150 years is about to come to a full stop as we move into an extremely different world. And the true value of gold and silver is going to shine like never before. The people who vividly see what's happening have moved into panic buying right now. The people who get it, who are positioned for wealth preservation, who are accumulating every week, every month, stand to change their course of history for 100 generations to come. Buying gold and silver from Carmine'sGold.com at unbeatable prices is the best decision you'll ever make. I'm going to end by saying this. This is my opinion and not financial advice. This crash is knocking on the door, and it's clear, it's here. We can fill any size order, $500, $500,000, and yes, even $10 million. Your best option to preserve wealth, if you don't understand cryptocurrency, is gold and silver. Do it now.